Hi, welcome back to the appendicular skeleton. In this portion, we're going to be talking about the arm and the forearm. So in the arm or the brachium, there's only one bone, and that is the humerus. And when you look at the humerus, this rounded portion, this is going to be the proximal end of the humerus, and the part that looks like it has all these knuckles, that is the distal end of the humerus. Remember, we use proximal and distal because we are in an extremity. We do not use superior and inferior in this area of the body. So starting with the most proximal landmark, that rounded ball area, that is known as the head of the humerus. And that is what articulates with the glenoid fossa in which bone? That's right, the scapula. And so since the arm is articulating with the scapula, that means the head of the humerus is going to be the medial aspect of the proximal end. Okay? So if this is medial, that makes these lumps to be on the lateral portion of the humerus. And the most lateral bulge is called the greater tubercle of the humerus. Okay? And it's called the greater tubercles because there are two. There's a big one and a little one. And so if you look on one side of the proximal end, you will see that there is a second lump. And let me show you, going back to where we have both anterior and posterior view, that on this view, we have a greater tubercle and we have a second tubercle, but on this view, we can only see the greater tubercle. This second one does not exist. So that second tubercle is smaller, so it's known as the lesser tubercle. And in between these two tubercles right here, there is an indentation, a valley. Think of the tubercles as hills, and there's a valley between the two of them. And that is called the intertubercular groove, or you can call it the intertubercular sulcus. What you're going to learn is there are a lot of anatomy structures that have more than one name. Names have evolved over time, trying to make them a little bit easier and more logical. So the groove between the greater tubercle and the lesser tubercle is called the inter, because that means between, tubercular. So tubercle is the noun, tubercular is the adjective. So the intertubercular groove is located on the anterior portion of the proximal humerus between the greater tubercle and the lesser tubercle. And that is it for the proximal end of the humerus. For us. From here, we're going to go almost halfway down the lateral aspect. Okay, so if the head of the humerus is medial, that makes the greater tubercle lateral. So stay on the lateral edge and continue down between a third and halfway down, and there is this bump, this thickening of the bone there, known as the deltoid tuberosity, because it's in this location that the deltoid muscle is going to be attaching to the humerus. After that, we're going to travel all the way to the distal end of the humerus where we have those knuckles. All right. So when we look at the distal end, let's go ahead and look at it on this picture. What you will notice is it looks like there are three parts to it. In reality, it's really not three parts. It's really only two. One part is a round circle bulge. It's like a ball sticking out. And the other part looks like an hourglass that has been turned on its side. And so this is how you get the 1, 2, 3 bulges, okay? So looking at this rounded part in my drawing is this rounded part right here. So it's the lateral aspect. Whereas these two are representing these two, where this one's in the middle and this part is the most medial bump. So these two bumps go together because they are one structure, and this is a different structure. So the two bumps that look like the hourglass turned on its side, that is known as the trochlea. This actually is the medial condyle on the distal end, just like the head was the condyle on the proximal end. But notice we're not calling any of these condyles, we're giving them names. And lots of bones have heads for the names of their proximal condyles. This is the only bone where the distal condyles have names. So the distal condyle on the medial aspect of the humerus, which are these two bumps, the hourglass turned on its side, that is known as the trochlea. And then the lateral bump, the rounded ball, that is the lateral condyle, which is known as the capitulum. Now, on quizzes and tests, you cannot write medial and lateral condyles for the humerus. For other bones, yes, but for this bone, you must write trochlea and capitulum. All right. Continuing on, if these are their condyles, then bumps on the condyles would be called epicondyles. So if you look at the trochlea right here, you notice there is a big bump on it, and so that is the medial epicondyle of the humerus. Now you need to write of the humerus because it's not the only bone that's going to have a medial epicondyle. For quizzes and tests, I'll usually write name the landmark and the bone, just to remind you, you need to write of the humerus. Okay. And if that is the medial epicondyle, then this bump, which is on the capitulum, would be the lateral epicondyle of the humerus. Okay. So if you need to stop and review, the trochlea being the medial condyle with its medial epicondyle, and the capitulum being the lateral condyle with its epicondyle, go ahead and do that now before we continue. All right. The last structure that I want to teach you about on the humerus is on which side? Look at this portion. Is this the anterior or posterior part of the humerus? Do you see, how do you figure that out? Well, remember we have the head medial on both of them. We have the greater tubercle medial lateral on both. But only anteriorly do we have a lesser tubercle with an intertubercular groove. Now you may say, well, Dr. Pell, I kind of see a groove here. Well, that groove is next to the head of the humerus. It is not between two condyles. So this is not the anterior view of the humerus at all. This is the posterior view of the humerus. So where we are looking is the posterior view of the humerus. Notice you don't see the capitulum nearly as nicely on this view as you did on this view, where it was super clear, capitulum and two bumps for the trochlea. On this view, you see the two bumps for the trochlea, but you really don't see a round ball for the capitulum. You just see a little bit of sticking below. Well, just proximal to the trochlea, there is an indentation in the bone, and that is known as the olecranon fossa. And with that, we are done with the humerus. Now we're going to move on to the two forearm muscles, which when you are in anatomical position with the palm facing anteriorly, they are parallel to each other. Now, when they are parallel, the radius is lateral and the ulna is medial. So let's start first with the ulna. And the way you can tell the ulna and its orientation is when you look at this bone, you see that there is a U-shaped divot at this end, U-shaped for ulna. And this is the proximal portion of the ulna, and this is the distal portion. And that U-shaped divot is called the trochlear notch. So that may sound very familiar to the trochlea, and that is because the trochlea of the humerus fits right there in the trochlear notch. And that is how you bend and flex your elbow, the movement of the trochlea within that trochlear notch. It's a hinge joint there. And so here is where the articulation ends. So the most proximal part of the ulna is known as the olecranon. And this is a word we had before. If you remember, on the posterior aspect of the humerus, we had an olecranon fossa, and that's because the trochlea goes in here, but right in there, but when you are extending, straightening your elbow, the olecranon goes into the olecranon fossa. It fits perfectly into the olecranon fossa of the humerus. Okay. So we have an olecranon, and we have a trochlear notch, and then we have this structure right there, which is called the coronoid process of the ulna. So 3 structures here at the proximal end of the ulna. After that, we get to skip all the way to the distal end of the ulna, where you have this little projection right there. I like to resemble it to a ballerina dancing on tippy toes right there. I don't know if you can see that. And this is called the styloid process of the ulna. We have multiple bones with the styloid process, so make sure you write the bone as well. And now we are done with the ulna, and we are going to move on to the radius. So the radius is a bone that looks like it has a flat crew cut, like a military person might get. My dad had lots of them when he was in the Air Force, when I was a lot younger. And this end actually is the head of the radius. So notice the head of the radius is flat and indented, and that is so that the capitulum fits right there. And so when both of these are moving against the humerus, the trochlear notch fits in the ulna, and the capitulum fits in the head of the radius for flexing and extending. So this is also the proximal end of the radius. And if you look down about an inch, you will see a big projection there. And that projection is called the radial tuberosity. This is where your biceps brachii muscle is going to attach, but it's not called the biceps tuberosity. Remember, in the humerus, we had a deltoid tuberosity with a deltoid muscle attached. Here it's just called the radial tuberosity because it's on the radius. And then after that, we're going to go all the way down to the end, the distal end of the radius, where it is once again on tippy toes. So what do you think that structure is called? That's right, it's the styloid process of the radius. So don't forget that the radius is red, so it is lateral, and the ulna is medial. And so for your own topical anatomy, you can find some of these landmarks on you. If you look at your wrist area, you can feel this bump right there. Is this medial or lateral? That's right, it's medial. So what bone is that going to be? It's going to be the ulna, and what you are feeling is this right here, the styloid process of the ulna. And similarly, if you go right over here, I have to find it, yes, right there above the wrist, you can feel the styloid process of the radius. So make sure if you're living with somebody, you start doing some topical surface anatomy with them to help you understand these landmarks. I want to thank you for this, and I will see you again soon as we move into the hand.